Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Conrad Challenge webinar series. I'm Joey Segura, Innovation Challenge and Programs Manager at Space Center Houston, and I'm excited to have you here for today's session. Tell your story, marketing in action. Today isn't just about advertising or logos, it's about communicating your value, understanding the people you serve, and learning how real innovators turn ideas into movements. By the end of this webinar, you'll be able to define your customer and early adopters, craft a clear, powerful value proposition, choose low-cost channels to reach real users, and measure traction and learn what works fast. Today, we are joined by a fantastic expert, Trina Sadberry, Head of Brand and Engagement at Equinor US. Trina is a leader in strategic storytelling, brand development, and stakeholder engagement. She works at the intersection of innovation, communication, and community, helping global organizations connect with the people they serve. Trina, thank you for being here today and sharing some of your expert insights on the world of marketing. And before we dive into our conversation today, I did want to give you a chance to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, and then a little insight on the fundamentals, the core principles behind how innovators talk about their value.
Sure. Thank you, Joey. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you, Space Center Houston, for having me here to talk a little bit about a passion of mine, which is storytelling. So, as Joey mentioned, I am head of brand and engagement with Equinor, the sponsor for the Conrad Challenge. We've been partnering with Space Center Houston and the Conrad Challenge for about 2 years, and I have to say, this is one of my favorite partnerships that I've ever had the opportunity to participate in. I've had the chance to meet some of the participants from last year. One of the prizes that we had last year was a trip to Boston, and I accompanied some of the winners on that trip and got to know some of them, have conversations, did some interviews with them, and it I was very much inspired by this generation of students, and it makes me really excited about the future and what you guys have to offer. I've been in I've been with Equinor for about 11 years. Equinor, if you don't know, is a global energy company. We produce oil and gas, wind energy, both offshore and onshore, solar and battery energy. And we try to produce it in as sustainable a way as possible. And we have offices all around the world in approximately 20 countries right now. So our position on brand, which kind of aligns with what we're talking about today, is searching for better. And I think that's what you guys are able to contribute. That's what you guys are trying to do through the Conrad Challenge. It's something that Space Center Houston believes in. And that's the reason we wanted to be a part of this challenge. I've been with Equinor for about 12 years. Prior to joining Equinor, I worked in other facets of the energy industry and of the tech industry, but always in the communications field. I got into communications or I decided to get into communications after hearing a person come to actually a career day when I was a junior in high school and talk about working in corporate communications. I had been working on the school newspaper and in yearbook, and I liked to write and I enjoyed English class, but I figured I might work for a magazine or a newspaper or something like that. I had never heard of corporate communications. So, and I probably wouldn't have because the internet was not invented at that time. So I wouldn't have been able to research it for several years later. So that gave me the chance that person gave me the chance to learn about a career, a passion that I have, which is communications. I've been doing it for almost 30 years. Um, this role, and I've held various roles within communications, and for the past 12 years, it's been with brand with Equinor. And this gives me an opportunity to get out into the public, to give back to the community, to share our brand story. I think Equinor has a very unique position within the industry. I enjoy telling that story. I enjoy engaging with the community through brands and sponsorships, being creative, but also the strategic side of marketing. And we'll get into a little bit of that as we get into a presentation I have. But just on storytelling, it is the foundation of almost everything we do in as a company, and not just in communications. It is critical that you learn how to tell a good story about your product, your service, your company, and even yourself. You have to be able to build a brand in all aspects of your career and life. So, just an example, we tell stories, of course, in brand. We tell them in different ways, whether it's on social media, it's on our website, it's through films that we produce. But we're also telling stories to some very critical stakeholders, um, such as our investors. They want to know who we are, what we stand for, where we're going. We have a very specific type of story that we tell that group. We're telling stories constantly to employees and potential employees. They want to know what our value proposition is, who we are, what we're about, what our culture is, then and why they should want to come work for us or why they should stay with us. Or what is our strategy for the future? Where will we go? So that's a different story that we're telling. We're also telling a story to potential customers. We're telling a story to the community about the work that we do in the community, um, about the efforts that we are making to, for example, on our projects that we have offshore wind projects in New York. We tell stories about the contributions that we're making to those communities, how we're creating jobs, how we are developing future, we're helping to develop people to work in an industry of the future. So we're talking about storytelling, and while you're probably going to focus on one story right now, as you continue to innovate, as you continue to build your business or grow in your career, you will learn that you will tell stories. You will have to shape stories in every aspect of your career. So it's a good time to learn it now, to put it into practice. And it's the foundation of what we do, not just in brand, but just in corporate America in general.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you sharing how storytelling is, a strategy to get your not just your consumer, not just the people you're trying to sell your product to, but in extending it to beyond that to the people you want to bring onto your team, to people that you want to support your company or anything like that. And marketing isn't just about reaching necessarily every single person in the world, but it's reaching the right people that can buy into what you're selling, the right people that can support you as you're growing your company or making all of those all of the things possible. And so I think that's a great segment, a great segment into your presentation that you have for us today, to kind of give some of these fundamentals of how they can take that storytelling and maybe put that into practice for their Conrad challenge or even beyond the Conrad challenge. So I think
Yep,
we do have those slides ready for you, queued up, ready to go. So I'm gonna let
great.
you take it over, but I appreciate you getting us kicked off.
So I will, as I mentioned, this is about marketing and storytelling, and I'm going to kick it off a bit by talking about what marketing is and the role that storytelling plays in marketing your company, your product, your solution. So a lot of people get things a bit confused. They kind of lump everything under market. They kind of think everything is the same, whether it's logos, whether it's a brochure, web content. But marketing is actually more so an umbrella term. And marketing is the process of promoting, selling, and distributing a product or service. And it encompasses a variety of activities aimed at understanding the customer's needs, creating value, and building relationships. So that's the overarching umbrella of what marketing is. And on this next slide, I kind of tell you what some of those things are. So we think typically about the more creative side of marketing, but marketing truly is one of those fields that's a combination of both art and science. So traditionally, of course, it's advertising, creating promotional content across your channels, it's public relations, managing your brand image, it's content marketing, it is brand identity, such as logos and taglines and your brand positioning, but it's also things like sales strategy, those key messages that you develop for sales. It's digital marketing, utilizing those online channels and measuring the success. It's customer relationship management. And it's also a lot of data and analytics these days. That is a big driver for marketing. The creative side, of course, is still critical and it's needed just to be able to capture the audience's attention these days. Attention is a hot commodity and it's difficult to capture attention. So analytics, we use them every day in determining what sort of channels we'll use, what's working, what's not working. So all of this plays a crucial role. It's not just the creative side, it is very much driven by data and analytics. But today, I want to talk specifically about something that falls under brand or branding, which is your brand story. And that's a narrative that describes your company and its purpose, who you help, your customer, what problem they face, how you help them, and what their challenges will look like if they choose your solution. As you can tell, as I mentioned, I'm passionate about storytelling. So there's, just to drive home the point, a lot of times we have to use storytelling for various reasons. Like if we have a very technical solution, or if we have a lot of facts or numbers, storytelling enables us to tell those stories in a way that people can relate to it. So, and it humanizes our brand a bit. So it builds that emotional connection. In addition, it differentiates us. This is storytelling is an opportunity to differentiate ourselves from our peers in the market, and oftentimes they're crowded markets. So this is one time that we get the chance to show, okay, this is how we're different. It also, as I mentioned, it simplifies complexity. It drives engagement and helps to grab attention, and it shows who we are and what we stand for. Brand storytelling includes brand marketing and brand narratives, content marketing, testimonials, advertising campaigns, social media, and as I mentioned before, investor relations, employee engagement, product development, and networking and partnerships also do quite a bit of storytelling outside of the traditional brand and creative side of things. So I want to talk a little bit today about how we go about starting to tell our story. I think the most important thing that I will probably tell you today is that before you can begin telling your story, you need to understand who you want to tell the story to and help them and figure out what you want to tell them, and two, what they want to hear, what they need to know. So you need to identify who that is. You have to identify your customers and early adopters. These are the people who are experiencing the problem most acutely and will validate your ideas quickly and save you resources if you work with early adopters as much as possible. Once you do that, you need to develop a clear value proposition. Speaking to and gathering data from those customers or early adopters will help you create those value propositions. And the value proposition, I'll talk a little bit more about how to create it. It's basically a compelling value proposition that resonates and differentiates your product from competitors effectively. Then Once you've shaped your story, you want to share it across marketing channels, and then you want to measure your traction and learn from various sources how you need to adjust maybe your channels that you use, your messaging, and you're going to want to continue to do that. So you develop the story, but you continue to adjust as necessary. So I'll go through each one of those in a little bit more detail. So we're talking about building an understanding of your customer and identifying early adopters. And you do that by researching your audience, and that includes conducting surveys and interviews to gather insights about the target audience, their needs and preferences. You want to analyze customer behavior by examining some of the data that they provide or that you may get from other sources to identify trends and preferences. And then you also want to build strong relationships with customers, whether it's through social media, personal interactions, or actively listening. So first of all, as I mentioned, we want to, as much as possible, try to identify early adopters for our solution or our technology. Earlier adopters tend to be more curious. They tend to be influential, so they may influence others to use your product or service. They're feedback oriented. They like to be beta testers. They like to give their opinion. Maybe a nice way of saying they're opinionated. They have strong opinions about things. And they enjoy being the first to try something that no one else is using. Think about the people in the early days who got the iPhone first. Those are early adopters because there were some people who were maybe a little bit reluctant because this was something that we hadn't seen before. And they're important because they, one, confirm that there's a market for the product. They provide insights they provide feedback that gives you the insights you need to improve the products. They help to generate buzz through their communications or word of mouth. They have credibility, and they help inform future development and marketing efforts as well. So this is the type of research that you'll need to do to understand and also identify who these early adopters could be. You think about your product and you'll have to do some digging and research and find out as much as you can about them, like all of their demographics in terms of their age, their gender, their location, the level of education, what their occupation is and their income level. All of these things are helping you to develop a profile or persona for one customer or multiple customers. So you start out with the basic demographics. Then you think about how this applies to your company. So you need to find out what are their biggest daily pain points or specific problems that they're trying to solve. What frustrations do they have with the current solutions that are out there on the market? What are their biggest fears related to the product or service? What's at stake if they do nothing? In some cases, there's a lot at stake if they do nothing. And what if they gain? What do they gain if they use your solution? These are just a few questions that you can begin with. I'm sure you all know that you can dig much deeper and find more details about some of the questions that you should be asking these early adopters. But gather as much information as you can. The more information you have, the better story you can tell. So once you have all of these questions, where do you find them? That can be a challenge for some, and sometimes you don't need as many to begin with, but you need ones who have the right information. They may be organizations such as industry organizations. You can also find them on various social media channels, such as LinkedIn or maybe even Facebook groups. Still, in some cases, may have some of the early adopters that you need, may have some of those forums. They may forget some of those forums. Also, just meeting them in person. Think about your own network. Who do you know that might know some of the type of people that you're looking for? And don't be afraid to just reach out directly on those social media channels, ask questions, ask people if they're willing to take surveys, explain what you're doing and the type of research that you're doing. You'll often find people who are willing to help, and they will be critical in helping you gather the information you need to tell your story. Once you have done this research, answered some of the questions, gathered some of the demographic information, gotten as much information as you can about your own product and about the customers for that product, you're going to want to create a value proposition. So I'll go over a little bit about how you develop this proposition that differentiates your product from your competitors. So, as I mentioned, a value proposition is a brief statement that explains the value of your product or service that brings to a specific customer audience. A value proposition answers who it's for, what problem it solves, how it solves the problem, what outcome the customer should expect, and why you're the better choice or the best choice. You'll find various ways to draft a value proposition, but I can tell you this is just a general one. You can find a million different ways to fill in the blanks to do this, but I like this method, the so they can. So basically, you're explaining what is being offered so that your customer will get the result you want, and it allows you to do this in a very brief, succinct way. And on the next slide, I have an example of how I was able to do that with a fictional company, but I created this company based on a challenge that UX students have difficulty finding real structured projects. And they have limited feedback and sometimes thin portfolios, which make it harder for them to get internships, or new graduates harder for them to get jobs. On the other hand, we also have project owners who need UX help, but they have limited budgets, limited time, and it's tough to vet talent. So this app is a two-sided platform that provides curated briefs and templates, feedback, instant portfolio publishing, and owners get matched to motivated student designers. Who it's for? It's for UX UI students with 0 to 2 years experience. They can browse through briefs, use guided templates, get peer mentor feedback, publish case studies, learn, earn ratings and endorsements. Students get real work, structured support, and faster to a higher ready portfolio. Founders or project managers or project owners can post a brief in minutes, get matched to students, and review with simple tools and approved deliverables. They get quick, affordable design help, transparent profiles, and ratings. So for a project like that has two separate customers or audiences that we wanted to capture, this is an example of how we might write a value proposition. The name of the app, Buildfolio, connects UX and UI students with real project briefs and guided feedback. So students build higher ready portfolios fast, while project owners get quality design help quickly and affordably. It doesn't have to be long. It's just a statement about what you do and how it benefits your customer. And that'll be the basis of your story. That one sentence is something you can begin to build off of to build your story. But you need that basic statement to say what you do so you can know who to direct your efforts toward, where to go to find the students, where to go to find the project owners. This will help to lay the foundation for your full story. So once you develop your marketing, as I mentioned, your value proposition, you'll need to figure out how you tell the story, where you tell the story. Of course, you can tell the story. I know that startups have very little funding in the beginning. They need to do this in as cost-efficient way as possible. So how you tell the story and where you tell the story is important. Social media, of course, is a great place to tell these stories. You can tell stories organically via LinkedIn, Instagram. LinkedIn is probably a good one to start with. There are different ways you can tell your stories affordably, and you can target them toward some of the business to business audience that a lot of you, I think, are targeting with your customers, and you can be a little bit more focused. But you can also use these stories for delivering presentations to different groups. You can develop brochures, you can develop handouts, you can use this for your website as well and drive people to your website using the social media channels. You can use forums like Quora. You can also use these stories through your network by sharing the stories with other partners in your industry. You can work together to share stories about each other. But there are various methods you can use, content marketing, community engagement, to tell this story fairly cost effectively. And you can measure these channels, social media channels, you can measure your email marketing, you can measure your website, and you can also continue to collect and analyze feedback that you used from those early adopter customers. So there are various simple metrics that you can use to get the feedback you need to develop your story, to build on your story, to shape your story in a way that's more effective. So you do that, of course, by continuing to survey your customers. You also look at which types of messengers are working on LinkedIn. You can do A/B testing. You can do two different types of ads in a different week or on the same week. You can see which one gets the most likes, gets the most comments. That'll help to guide you into the direction. And as you do that, your story may have to be adjusted and adapted accordingly. And that's how you should view storytelling, as it's not just one document that you file away, but it's a living document. You adjust it accordingly based on your audience, based on feedback, based on the channel, and continue to build upon it. So those are just some key steps that you should consider as you're building your story. There's much more to the storytelling story, but those are some foundations that you should begin with.
Wow. That was fantastic. I felt like I learned a lot about marketing and storytelling just from that. So I thank you, Trina, for sharing your knowledge. And you covered so many different things, from understanding those early adopters, the clear value propositions, choosing your right marketing channels, especially because these students are high school students that are competing in this. So low cost or zero budget is a great starting point for so many of these, because they don't have the high end marketing departments that a major corporation might have. One question that I would love to ask you, with all of this in mind, now that they have the foundations of telling the story, finding the early adopters, making a compelling, clear value proposition. And then we touched a little bit on analytics, but in the marketing department, in the marketing world, what are some early signs that these students can look for to see that their marketing strategy is working? How do they build traction? So what signs as a professional do you use to see that, yes, this particular avenue, channel, early adopter was the right choice?
So some, I think they should rely on, first, at this stage, the feedback that they're getting from their customers, first and foremost. I think that's going to be very important for them, because even when we get analytics back on campaigns that we may have run, we don't really know the full story. We're not able to fully understand what the numbers mean sometimes. Sometimes we can, like we can say, oh, this got many more hits. So I think we're going in the right direction by using this channel. Like LinkedIn is great for telling this particular type of story because we put this on Instagram and it didn't do anything. So just comparing the numbers, that's good. But I think the most important feedback you can get is from the actual customers. That can be through the surveys that you send out, through any sort of general feedback that you get from them. And that's not to discount at all the analytics you get through any sort of SEO tools, or just uh, running numbers on your social media, but it allows you to dig deeper. It's kind of like your own little focus group and helps you to adjust. But I think just seeing the numbers rise or seeing how long people are willing to watch a story, watch a video, listen, uh, stay on your page, I think that's helpful because attention spans are very short. If you see people um, playing a video for the full length, that's amazing because that does not happen much these days. So I think that's a great sign.
So, you mentioned these feedback surveys. So, when looking at the analytics, clicks, email openings,
Hmm.
utilizing some of the maybe the rudimentary search engine optimization tools that they might have available
Hmm.
to them. You said numbers are great, but in the full picture, it's the priority should go to the customer feedback. Now, these students are very passionate. These teams, startups in general, are very passionate about their innovation, their purpose, and why they're creating what they're creating. When these students are developing these surveys, what advice would you give them? So I imagine it's going to be we have a population of people, and we're going to send them some sort of survey, whether it's a Google survey, maybe it's a Microsoft form of some sort. What advice would you give these students on crafting these types of surveys so that they can get honest and objective feedback that can help grow their company and develop and positively impact their innovation, and how to avoid the pitfalls of creating questions that almost lead the customer to where the
Yeah.
company wants to go?
Yes. So to get um, good feedback from your surveys, I think one of the things you can do is keep them short. I think that's helpful so that people won't stop midway through the survey and you have no feedback. Also, think very carefully about how you ask the question. And even if you have to, rewrite it multiple times, run it through some sort of AI to say, is this question written to get a good objective answer? Do that because I've been guilty myself. I have written a question and then when I come back and see the survey, I said, oh, I didn't realize that was as vague as I thought it was, or if it kind of led them into a direction, but try to be as clear as you can with the survey questions and as objective as you can. And also leave space for open-ended answers so that you can get the feedback you need. And finally, make sure that your surveys are going to the right people, to the specific question, to the specific audience that you need the answers from. Again, just like with your communications, they should be very targeted. With your story, they should be targeted. With your survey, they should be targeted. Otherwise, they're not going to be effective.
And so when you're giving advice to these young startups, or even larger startups or larger business, when they're going in for the early adopters, um, what pathway? Because we know that the early adopters, they need to be the curious. They should be the ones that are like the first in, the ones that have the most interest in your particular field of innovation, whatever your invention or company might be. What strategy advice would you give to a team on finding an early adopter for their specific innovation? Because we span five different categories, from health, cyber, energy, aerospace, and our water challenge.
Yeah.
How can students get their mindset right that, okay, I know I got to find early adopters, but where do I go to get them specifically?
I think it's where they go, but it's also being courageous enough to knock on the door, ask the question, um, put yourself out there, and take the risk of asking someone to help you or to introduce you to someone or just to be willing to participate in this. You may find them, but I think that's first and foremost, not to be afraid. Go ahead and put yourself out there. I think you would be surprised how many people are willing to help students like yourself get ahead or achieve a goal. As I mentioned, I was super inspired by the efforts of everyone that I met last year. And speaking for myself, I know if someone approached me and wanted me to help, I would be happy to help with something like that if you explain to them what you're trying to do. Um, Also, I think about who, if you're working on a team, think about whose strength that may be. Like this, because it's literally like sales. It's like pounding the pavement, trying to find people who is not, who's not afraid of a no, who doesn't mind going over and over and asking people on Reddit or Discord to help them out with something. Go ahead and let that person be the person who is trying to find those people. If that's their strength, if that's their where their interest lies, let them get out get out there and start collecting some of those early adopters because it is a sales job, but I think it's one that people will be surprisingly supportive of if you ask them. And also, in addition, Reddit in general, but like I said, do not discount those industry organizations. I think you'll probably get a lot of support from those groups as well. Same thing though, just having the courage to go out there and ask them. And most of them have LinkedIn groups. There's literally a LinkedIn organization for every type of career, technology. Search LinkedIn and you'll find them.
No, yeah, I like that advice a lot, especially just the courageous part, just being able to, I think the way you put it is like find the person who's okay with getting a no. Because I know, I mean, I feel like having talked to some of these innovators in the past for Conrad Challenge to the professionals that we work with, there's a whole lot more no's than there are yeses, but it's the yeses that really get the ball rolling on your innovation. And so, I really like that. I have two more questions, and then we're gonna switch over to our Q&A session. But when we're looking at, so we talk LinkedIn being a great place to get started to get some of these surveys. Um, would you have like a top three, like broad speaking channels that you would have students prioritize? I know, marketing has changed a lot. It used to be put it in a magazine, then it was put it into commercials, and then it's, back in the day, it was, put it in the mail. And so now in modern day, what would you say if you said, you have three choices? What three channels would you say this is where you need to start in terms of marketing?
I think everyone should, of course, start on LinkedIn. I think most of these are going to be B2B type of projects. And even if they're not, I think you should start on LinkedIn even because they have the different groups. So start there. Um, I think Reddit has a fairly strong startup community as well. I have not been on Discord, but I've heard that they have a fairly strong one. And I often see, and I know you said three, but I've seen different startups or different people, and I will admit I'm not sure how effective they are, but I do see a lot of people who are willing to help at least. Um, Even going on like TikTok and telling their story, capturing people there, that's a great place for storytelling or story times. Like tell them what kind of help you're looking for. You might be surprised. And even if you put even a fairly small amount of money to boost your posts, you might get some support there.
All right. So LinkedIn, Reddit, Discord, TikTok. I think those are some great places to start. And I'm sure with these students that are in this, the 13 to 18 year
That'll
old
probably
range, that
change next week though, just a
that
warning.
that's yeah, exactly. We might have to put in an edit on this one,
Yeah.
next week with the newest and latest and greatest. All right. My
Hmm.
last question before we get into our question and answer session for our viewers today. What's one lesson you wish every young innovator or startup knew about marketing or storytelling before before they got started into the innovation game?
I think I wish that they understood the importance or how valuable a story can be. I think I've probably reiterated it several times now, like how deeply embedded storytelling is will be in everything you do as you begin your career, and the importance of having that story. I still remember some of the stories some of the students told me from last year and how passionate they were. The ones that were particularly interesting to me were the ones where there was a personal connection to their technology or solution. Um, they were, or who were passionate about doing something for society. It really meant a lot to them, and they were able to weave that story into, um, they were able to personalize that or add that to their story. Also, just for the judges to be able to get from point A to point B with a very clear story on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you're passionate about it. And that's just not for this, but that's just for like almost everything you'll do. It can take you very far. So I think just having a story, understanding that you should have a story. I'm sure a lot of the people on the call may be working on essays right now for college, or they will be soon. So you probably understand the importance of knowing what your story is and how far it can take you. Same thing with this. And I think you would be surprised about how much those stories resonate with the people that you're talking to.
I like that. So those of you that are watching this, Conrad competitors or just startups in general, or young innovators and young entrepreneurs, when you are looking at what you're presenting to a customer, to potential shareholders, to investors, you want to be able to ask yourself, is our story coming across in every single aspect of what we're presenting, from the innovation brief to the business plan, to the website, to the video that you're going to be creating? Does your entry, does your brief and your business plan tell your story how you want it to be told? And I think taking some of these foundations that Trina shared with us today and putting them into every aspect of your Conrad Challenge entry is something that our students should be working on as they move forward in the Conrad journey. Trina, I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experiences with our competitors and our audience today. I think you've given them some great things to take home and apply to their Conrad Challenge product. And now what I want to be able to do is we have some time. We want to open the floor to questions. Our producer extraordinaire, Megan, is moderating questions in the Q&A chat. So if you have a question, just enter it into that Q&A chat. We'll be moderating. We'll be looking for questions from our audience. Remember, uh, keep it brief as you can, clear and concise. Avoid any personalized information or intellectual property or IP information. So we'll open that up right now and question. So we got three questions that are coming in for us, Trina. The first one is a good one for you. Um, there are three team. This is coming from Amrita Patel. There are three team members in my group, and the CEO is the one that has the most personal story. However, me and my other are wondering on good ways to convey that we too are invested in this project. Do we have any tips to be able to bring a full team story on?
I think that I think it just depends on how you write it. I think that um, depending on how you present it, as long as it's presented in a balanced way, it's okay if one person has a more personal story. I know I met someone last year where one person had the more personal connection to the technology, but and you couldn't tell because they all had equal parts of the presentation, they were all just as passionate about creating this technology. And also, depending on like how it's written, you don't necessarily have to have the CEO mention this. It can just be something that you're passionate about as a group. And I think either one of those ways could work. Just thinking, ensuring that there's a balance between the three of you, like ensuring that each of you tell a very important part of the story, or just making it a story that's overarching, that this is something that the team is very passionate about. Without knowing what it is specifically, it's hard to say, but I think that's okay, basically. I think you just have to, how you balance up the communications is how you figure that out.
Yeah, I love that answer. All right, our next one coming from Nunafat. If my solution is addressing health-related issues, but the solution is a questionnaire that requires personal information from the users, how can I make a privacy notice? I think for this particular one, you want to be cognizant of the privacy laws and what if you're in the U.S., look at the HIPAA laws. If you're in other countries outside the U.S., look at your country's laws or what's internationally done. But the other part is when it comes to personal information, you want to be very cautious about collecting that and what you're going to be doing that because personal information is and private information is very sensitive, and you want to be sure that you're doing it the right way. So I would, look at other professional institutes and see how they go about doing it, or ask yourself, is personal information something that is necessary at this time? Trina, I don't know if you've had in your marketing experience having to collect personal information. How do you usually navigate those waters?
I have not. I have not had um, that experience as of yet. I would say though, be be very careful about that. We, as I mentioned, we are a Norwegian company, and Joey, I know you've experienced this with us having to deal with the GDPR laws, and we are very careful about what is published, what sort of information we collect, and we have to get approvals signed off. If they're under 18, parents have to sign off for anything that we use, that we publish, even if it's not published, any data that we collect. So we're very careful about that, and I would just lean toward caution there.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. Lean towards as much caution as possible. Um, so I have two questions I'm going to lump together. James, Andrew, and Pooja. James, you asked the question, what is your biggest piece of advice for the innovation stage, as well as are there recordings of previous webinars for us to listen to? I lumped those two together because James, because I am not an alumni of the Conrad Challenge. I run I'm a manager of the Conrad Challenge. One thing I will tell you to do is we do have and I'll have Megan, our producer, if she can, we'll put a link up here in just a second. But on YouTube, it's published and it's public. We have our series of we'll have 3 right now and 4 next week, but all 4 of these webinars will be available. The first 3 are already published and ready to be watched. In those webinars, we have alumni members who participated in the conversation. Unfortunately, this time around, many of these alumni members are college students in their undergraduate studies, and it's finals week for a lot of them. So that's why we did not have an alumni here with us. But the first 3 shared the first 3 webinars have some very good insight on advice from Conrad Challenge alumni. So James and Pooja, we'll have that posted. You can also just go on the Conrad Challenge website, and we have that linked in our student resources section. But go give those videos a listen to because they give really good advice on how they attack not just the activation stage, but also the innovation stage. So that would be my advice to you, James, on that. Yes, Trina.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say really quickly about the question about health. I know that some surveys you should not be able to have, you should be able to set it up where there's no identifying information on who's answering the question. And if that's like certain, not Google Forms. It would have to be, and you may have to buy a subscription to like a survey tool to get this type of privacy, but that could be a possibility.
Yes. And all else fails, exercise extreme caution and be a little bit innovative when it comes to questioning so that you can maybe not have to get any personal information that might be sensitive. And then our last question that we'll answer today, are we allowed to modify our idea from activation stage to innovation stage? So we understand that from activation to innovation, there hopefully is some iterative processes going on, meaning you're improving, you're modifying a little bit. Um, so our official stance here is that what you're changing, you are going to remain in the same category. Your overall purpose and your overall solution or your problem needs to remain the same for the most part in the same vein. There can't be any extreme deviations from that, but you must remain in your same category. We understand that there are going to be improvements and iterations of your product, and there might be slight changes, but there cannot be drastic, complete 180 changes. You must stick with the spirit of the innovation and the process, the problem that you're stating. And all else fails, if you have a hyper specific question on what is being changed, you can always email us at info@conradchallenge.org. Myself and Megan and our Conrad team, we run that email. And we're happy to answer those specific questions to see if your case is something. But that's the answer to that one. And so now we're going to wrap things up. I want to go ahead and give a big thank you to Trina for joining us today and sharing her wisdom on storytelling and marketing. And just to know our key takeaways from today, know exactly who your early adopters are, communicate clearly, and focus on what users care about. Choose those low cost channels that reach the right people. Test, measure, iterate, repeat, and above all else, be courageous. Don't be afraid to go and ask the question. And if maybe you're afraid, then someone on your team can step up and be that person who's willing to take a few no's before you get the almighty yes. Thank you all. And remember, your innovation matters, but your story is what brings people to it. Have a great day and happy innovating, everybody.